Okay, so this is actually coming from Polygon.com. This is really interesting. So many people may or may not know, but back in the day, DC Comics had a contest where basically they wanted to know if the Jason Todd, spoiler alert, the Jason Todd version of Robin should live or die. And so they had actually a contest where you could call in. I guess now you would text or, I don't know, leave a comment. But they wanted people to call in on a phone and basically register a vote. Either Jason Todd should live, Jason Todd should die. Well, for many years, there's a lot of people have known that there was some additional art produced because they were ready to pull the trigger on Jason Todd living. But of course, the people voted and Jason Todd died. I'm very sorry, everyone. I voted for Jason Todd to die. I did not like the Jason Todd version of Robin. He just seemed kind of whiny and whatever, and I didn't care for him. And so I said, let's get rid of him. Okay, now, he eventually redeemed himself with Batman the Cult, and I felt completely horrible about voting for Jason Todd to die because he literally saved Batman's bacon and Batman the Cult. If you have not read the series Batman the Cult, I cannot recommend it enough. Just beautiful, beautiful art by Bernie Wrightson. Truly powerful, amazing, awesome Batman story. Batman the Cult. Definitely check it out. But this is obviously talking about the story that ran in Batman Comics, where they basically, the fans voted and Robin needed to die. What's interesting about this article, I'm just going to kind of run through it real quick because you're going to need to just go on the internet and find it. But the most tragic moment in Batman's history almost looked like this. In 1988, Robin died. DC Comics still has the pages of the book in which he didn't. That's right, everyone. DC Comics still has the pages of the book in which he didn't die. So here's kind of a hopeful outlook for this story. This is by Susanna Polo, and again, this is on Polygon. So I'm going to read some of this real quick. The last decade has been a renaissance for Jason Todd, the second character to fill the role of Robin, the world's most famous superhero sidekick. He's appeared in movies, TV shows, and video games, while even his comic book self became the leader of his own team of anti-heroes. But it'll be quite some time before Jason manages to eclipse the story he's most famous for. Out of all the characters who have put on the Robin suit, Jason is the one who died in it. Yet, he almost lived. In 1988, DC Comics left the decision to off the character in the 4-issue storyline, A Death in the Family, up to an incredibly close running reader poll. To meet the publishing schedule, the creative team prepared for either eventually by writing and partially illustrating a comic which Jason survived the Joker's attempted murder and one in which he died. The tragic ending was the one chiseled into comics history. On the 80th anniversary, that's right, everyone, Robin is turning 80. On the 80th anniversary of Robin's first appearance, Polygon is excited to present a look at some of that unfinished issue, including high-resolution scans of rarely seen work from writer Jim Starlin, one of my favorite Batman artists, Jim Aparo, and inker Mike DiCarlo, straight from the DC Comics archives. We didn't kill the Boy Wonder, the readers did. So this is a really, really terribly interesting article. They have some artwork. This is from the one of the ads that they ran where they wanted you to call in. But I want to get to the most important part. I'm going to scroll down. Here it is, everyone. This is pretty cool. So we have side by side the published page in which Jason Todd died, and on the other one where apparently he was alive. He was nearly dead, but he was alive. And then we have here where Jason Todd is on the mend in the hospital. So I thought this was really interesting because I'd always heard about these, but I'd never seen some of these images, like he almost lived stuff, because if fans had voted the different way, Jason Todd would have survived his attack by the Joker. That would have been an interesting storyline. So I know that you're familiar with this story, Eric, because you're a comic fan like me. So I know you're familiar with Death in the Family, and of course, Jason Todd dying. But I didn't know, had you heard about this, that DC on his 80th anniversary that they were going to release some of these images?
No, I didn't know they were going to release some images. I thought they did release some images before, because I have I think it's in my History of DC book. They talk a lot about this. Um, Incidentally, when I was preparing for last week's episode and I was digging up my old comics, I have my Death in the Family, the graphic novel version that has all the comics together. So it's not the floppy version; it's the graphic novel version that tells the entire story. That was in my collection there. It was in that box. So I did buy this when it came out. And I remember, I feel like it was one of my History of DC books or something like that. It could have been an article I read, but I remember them talking about the experience of doing this and how much DC regretted what they did because they got some intense backlash. And the reason is pretty simple. The reason is that Batman kind of transcends the comic in terms of popularity. Batman is more popular than the comic book is. That's the character, you know what I mean? Because of the movies, television shows, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, when this happened, they thought they had killed Dick Grayson because they weren't reading the comic books. And the casual person, because this was covered on the news, and the casual person, the casual fan who say like the Adam West series, let's say, that's kind of what something that had already been out. When they saw this, they were like appalled and disgusted, and they thought Dick Grayson had been murdered. You know, not realizing that there was a second Robin. I don't think I even knew there was a second Robin at that time because, as I say all the time, I didn't grow up reading a lot of superhero comics. I was into G.I. Joe and Transformer comics. Those are the kind of comics that I read. So I don't think I even was aware. So I got this out of curiosity and also for collectability, read the story and all that stuff. And then, of course, I realized. One of the things I remember in that article that I read was that the problem with this whole approach and what happened was there were only like a couple thousand people, I think, that voted. There weren't that many people that voted on this. And they realized, why are we doing this? Why are we giving like such a small group of fans the decision, such a profound decision that's going to affect the entire fandom? And it's kind of interesting because we talk now about things like fan interaction. We've even been talking about it on our show today. And what are the limits of fan interaction and fan decisions, if you will? Because I think in a lot of ways this was a bad one, and it was a little bit of like a PR disaster for DC. I don't know what the numbers were as far as how well these issues sold, and if they did like make quite a killing on as far as issues being sold. But I do recall the article that I read. They had a lot of like buyer's remorse where people at DC was like, "We're not ever doing this again. That was a bad idea."
Well, what's interesting about it too is, well, I know the editorial team, did regret the decision to do some of this. I know that this is a very important storyline for a lot of Batman and DC Comics fans, and the most interesting thing about this story is because of this story, we actually get one of the best of the DC direct to. It's not DVD anymore, but the DC animated film Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is probably one of the best the DC animated films they have ever made, and that animated film isn't available, was never happens basically without Death in the Family. We have this character of the Red Hood. The Red Hood as the hero or the kind of outlaw hero that he is today. We have that character because of this storyline. So it spawned some interesting stuff. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, since we were talking about Picard and basically the death of a beloved character that everyone's kind of rediscovered. I thought it'd be interesting when I saw this. We've got Robin's 80th anniversary coming up. They're releasing a special issue to commemorate and celebrate Robin. They also have one for the Joker that's actually coming out pretty soon as well, because we've got a lot of important DC heroes and villains celebrating anniversaries. But I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it was neat that they put these high-res scans on the internet. So if you're curious about this or interested in it, it's a really cool, fun article. It's on Polygon. I'll try and link it in the show notes when I actually do the podcast, the audio podcast version of the show. But I thought this was interesting, worth talking about. So that's my lead news story for pop culture tonight.
No, it is interesting, and it does tie in with our feature topic with Picard, and how do you deal appropriately with the death of major characters and things like that. characters that people really like. And again, this is a really interesting case study because they did allow the fans to vote on this. But again, my understanding was in terms of the fandom, you were talking about a very small percentage of Batman fans that actually participated in this vote or even knew it was going on, even knew it was happening, you know?
Yep. And like I said, I'm guilty. I voted.
Murderer.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, there's that.